welcome back to the Ink Sink. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
This is the publishing podcast for the rest of us, where we cover books, news, writing, reading, and today we are changing up our format.
Dun dun dun.
I'm excited. Kaylee, are you excited?
Yeah, no, I'm in. I enjoy just bullshitting with you at any given opportunity. So I'm not a complex creature. Like hanging out.
You asked for it. You're getting it. You are getting us non-complex creatures in your ears every week moving forward.
You're welcome, Maryland. And whoever else is listening.
So our stats do say that we do have one listener in Russia, but I think that's just someone with a VPN bouncing. I cannot imagine what Russian is like.
God bless you.
I want to know what's going on in the American book publishing market.
This is such a specific niche. I have a painting coming from Russia of my cat, which should not surprise you at all.
Good. What a weird world we live in. Like the Ukrainian-Russian war is holding up a painting of your cat.
It's very cute. I can show you. It's adorable.
It's funny, we're actually talking about Ukraine later. This is good intro, but this is not what I wanted to talk to you about just at the moment. Kaylee, how are we changing our format?
So we're going to do a more regular format where we kind of alternate our news segments with our main segment. That way we can more consistently stay with all of you. I assume most of our friends. That just want more regular contact and communication with the two of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you people want more from us,
but hey, you know what? You asked for it for some reason.
Our public needs us, so.
But yeah, no, I mean, we're
just too popular for our own good, Kaylee. That's the problem.
That out of everything happening, that's the problem.
That's our main issue. On. So you guys are going to hear us in your ears. Every week, we are going to alternate between news segments and main topics, and we are super excited to bring you this one, our first
dun dun dun
news section solo. Kaylee, we are celebrating an anniversary this year.
Absolutely correct. We are. Yeah,
we talked about, a little while ago, we talked about 50 Shades of Grey and how it had come out. Neither of us had read it, but we were talking about the huge impact that it had had on...
We're terrible at this.
We were talking about the huge impact it had had on specifically the romance market, but also the self-publishing market and the book market in general. Another one that came out relatively close on the heels of 50 Shades of Grey was...
Gone Girl.
Did you read Gone Girl?
Yeah, girl.
What did you think when you first read it?
Oh my god, so good. You guys, it's just, look, it holds up, like, across the board, even if you already know, like, the twist or whatever, which by this point you should. It's just genuinely engaging, fascinating writing of people that you probably don't want to spend time with, but it's so good. What about you, Annie?
Can I be 100% honest with
you? You're allowed to say you didn't read it if you didn't.
I started it and
they're not likable characters.
But, I mean, I can acknowledge the impact. I mean, pre-Gone Girl, if you picked up a thriller, you were more likely to be looking at serial killer cop drama or a closeted murderer who was just really looking forward to killing someone or something like that. Post Gone Girl, it is like, oh my god, your husband might kill you, or you might kill your husband, or your husband might be a serial killer and you might be his next victim.
Or maybe you're helping him, but you don't know in the book. Domestic thrillers. It really exploded, for sure.
So I've obviously read parts of it since then because it is so iconic and so influential. The cool girl monologue is probably one of the most incredible breakdowns.
Her delivery is so good.
For those of you who haven't read Gone Girl, it is a domestic thriller about a husband and wife. Wife goes missing, drama ensues. It sounds like just, like a cozy little No, it's a thriller. Shit goes down. I'm not going to spoil it for you.
And you find out in the middle, but it still keeps going, and it's still very tight writing.
I'm not sure where the movie is streaming right now. It might be on Netflix, but Rosamund Pike, who is incredible, plays the main character, and she delivers the cool girl monologue perfectly. I'm going to put up the link to the clip of her doing the monologue in our show notes because it is just so good. So this is from Esquire. Maris Kreisman talked about, this is the subtitle of the piece, 10 years after its publication, this literary sensation still casts a long shadow over the psychological thriller market. Does the novel hold up? And spoilers, it does.
Yes. Yes.
But it's one of those things where when you get a book where forever after someone says, read this book if you liked X. Stephen King, they point out in this article, constantly says, if you liked Gone Girl, read this book. If you liked Gone Girl, this one's like that. Or I haven't read something as good as this since Gone Girl. And it's just one of those books, like 50 Shades of Grey, like Harry Potter, like Lord of the Rings. They're just instant classic. And I am forcing myself to go back and read it. I don't know about you.
So I haven't reread the book. I read the article, I rewatched the monologue. Again, I mean, we've already talked about this. It was good. Like, the writing was good. I didn't like the characters, and that's kind of what I personally need to engage with a media in like, I will reread books. I just want to be very clear. Maybe it's a problem. I reread books a lot. I like characters, and if I reread a book, it's because I like your characters, and I love books because I like your characters. It's not complicated. It's pretty consistent. I like USA Network as far as TV shows go because they're character driven. This book is complicated as far as that goes. You understand the characters, probably, or at least, especially if you're a woman. She's very good.
She's a very good writer. I haven't read any of her other books either.
So good.
Have you read any other Gillian Flynn books? Here's a question that like may be like us starting off on a whole other tangent. When you read a mystery and you know the twist at the end and it's a good twist, can you then reread it?
That's a great question. Like, this is one that you could. Just the writing's tight, but some of them I don't, for sure.
I have to say I don't really reread mysteries. They're one of those things that I plow through. Like, I love them, but once I know the twist, I don't reread it again. It's like watching a Scooby-Doo. Like, once you know it's the old man, it's not fun anymore. Like, it's fun when you think it's a ghost. You know what I mean?
You never think it's a ghost. You always know it's old man Jenkins.
Okay. I want you to know that when I was like 5, I sometimes thought it was a ghost.
I'm sorry, Annie. I apologize. I didn't mean to shame 5-year-old Annie in any way. I apologize. So can I talk about my thoughts before we continue? Because we actually didn't really mention, we just mentioned that was the anniversary. And
it is, yeah. Well, that is the news.
Does the book hold up? And the answer is yes, of course, yes, which is the long and short of the article. However, the author did say something, which was that the only thing that maybe didn't hold up for them was the cool girl monologue. And so I was just interested to hear that from someone, and I was thinking about that. I was like, why do I think that might be the case? And then, do I think that our current society as it exists is somehow different than it was 10 years ago? No. What I do think is that we are slowly shifting into a place that might in the future be different. And I think that is because the cultural phenomenon of the cool girl monologue was put into the zeitgeist of our younger generations to the point where they're talking about it and that they acknowledge that it is a thing and that you shouldn't be beholden to some idealized image of yourself that another person is projecting onto you. And that I think that happens. I just want to be clear. That's what I'm saying. I still think that especially young men are putting out there and young women are still susceptible to.
I think we all want to live in a world where that monologue is inaccurate.
I don't think we're there yet.
I don't think we're there yet. I think it was very hopeful of this author to say that we're not there anymore.
Our next segment was, okay, look, at the end of the day, knowing that we are what we are, we will try to bring in alternate opinions. So anyway, so there was a request specifically from people that wanted more control over
what their children are
reading. Yeah.
This is a story we've been following for a while. I think we've talked about book banning consistently for
freaking episode, I feel like.
Several months.
It's an ongoing discussion in our country. Sorry, the rest of you have to deal with it. Our one Russian listener.
But basically, up till now, it's been in schools and in libraries. So it's been kind of concentrated in that area. And now it's moving into
the private sector.
Yeah. This group of parents has gone to Barnes and Noble and said that these specific book.
I want every goddamn romance novel to be included. She gets tied up. There's thrusting, and
but
it's not. It's not. No, this is a very clearly targeted approach.
I'm going to tell you guys the quick cliff notes.
Please do. I can't talk about this objectively at all.
So these parents went to Barnes & Noble and said that the book Genderqueer, a book about the non-binary and asexual experience, demanding that Barnes & Noble require parental consent before selling the book to minors. So their thought is, and you more or less understand that parental controls exist on other types of media, what they want to do is say that parental control should exist when purchasing books. I promise you, they're still gonna know that it exists.
Gonna find it. I will say it again.
We have been very passionate about this also because this has been something that has been affecting libraries. But now it's moving into the capitalist sphere. And I feel like Barnes & Noble has an even bigger incentive to not let just random Facebook groups tell them not to sell things. It seems very strange to me.
It's baffling. It's
We'll see where it goes. So
baffling.
This proposal went through. We don't know. It may have just been for show, just so that this one politician can say, hey, I'm working on this. We don't know. We'll see where it goes. We will keep you updated. But for now, that is where we're at.
We should write to that politician. I can't remember his name, but we should.
We don't need to say his name on this podcast, I feel. We don't need to give him any buzz marketing.
I agree. No, but we should just be like, hey, the things that you say you want to do would not happen with this.
Yeah.
And if you do it, you're just a shill. You're a puppet. You're a little man dancing on a string. Anyway.
I want you guys to know that's about as insulting as Kaylee gets.
I'm not good at it, but
You're a trash puppet person dancing on a string.
Anyway, do better.
So because, of course, I started this section with the book banners side, I then wanted to put in something that is actually often left out of the debate, which is how people who are being banned from reading certain books feel about them. Now, we don't really know how the kids are feeling because most kids' voices are filtered through their parents, but one group of people who
are adults
and who have access to libraries where books are often banned are prisoners. The truth is that, unfortunately, things like the autobiography of Malcolm X are banned from prisons, but Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler is not.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. You know, they're like, oh no, it's bad in prisons, but also because it's inciting whatever racial violence. Oh, but you mean Mein Kampf isn't? Actual Nazism isn't. Apparently. Okay, let's just be clear. When I say apparently, I have spiritual air quotes.
I want you guys to know that when Kaylee said spiritual air quotes, my dog made a gagging sound.
And she should, because your soul is distressing.
She was like, oh, spiritual air quotes. Actually, I want spiritual air quotes to be on a t-shirt.
Cheers.
That should be our Library Army spiritual air quotes. So, in case you were wondering how people feel about having books banned from their lives.
They don't like it.
They don't, and I thought that their ideas were kind of really closely aligned to how the teachers have been justifying their position, which is this is information that exists in the world, and if you want to be well adjusted or to know what's happening in the world, you need to have this information. Maybe you don't read the whole book. Maybe we don't teach the book as the best thing ever, but knowing that the book exists, what is in it, and why it mattered to the person who wrote it, and why it matters to the audience that reads it, can be very important and valuable, especially to people who don't have access to a lot of those views in person.
I just want to be clear, my parents are very socially conservative, and they would never do this to my sister. So when I say that you're not a good person, I mean that from somebody that is watching this happen in real time.
She's currently in high school.
She's
She's experiencing this probably.
Yes. Every single person around her is experiencing this. It's not just a geographic phenomenon. We're all experiencing it, but she's experiencing this on a more of a radical level, perhaps, because she's in the South. And my parents, they're not being assholes. It's not hard.
They're good parents who love their kids.
It's not hard. Yep.
There's nothing really for us to talk about here. I wish that
said everything I could possibly
there was something I could do and be like, oh, here guys, I'm going to direct you to a link that, lets you help. But basically just patronize your local library, support your local library, and don't be a dick. Moving on. So this is something that I've actually been sitting on for a while. This story, it's really not a story. A book was published and people got mad at it is pretty much
welcome to the internet.
Yeah, subtitle of all Twitter. So that happened and I was aware of it because I am obviously, unfortunately, terminally on social media, and so
it's a fatal condition.
It really is a problem. So I was aware that this had happened and I hadn't really wanted to talk about it, but the author of the book that had caused such controversy ended up writing in The Guardian. And I thought she actually wrote a really interesting piece about the history of the gender utopia speculative fiction. So I really wanted to talk about that and have it as a jumping off point to what we really can also talk about in this situation. I will tell you the drama that happened. So in The Guardian, titled The End of Men, the controversial new wave of female utopias, subtitled, there have been many novels that imagine a world without men, but are these books reductive or freeing?
Dun, dun, dun.
written by Sandra Newman. And the reason that Sandra Newman wrote this article is because she wrote one of these books. She wrote a gender utopia book, or a gender, we call it a gender plague book in the biz just because it's an easier way to say it. So if you've heard of Y the Last Man, where everyone with a Y chromosome died, the short-lived TV show, which we were very excited about and then got very heartbroken when it was canceled. Rip. Great book if you are a fan of Brian K. Vaughan's comics. But it's true. This is genuinely a well-established genre.
No, for sure.
And it very closely follows the waves of feminism back in the 60s and 70s. The gender utopia books were genuinely about, like, the gender utopia, like, it was some faraway thing where, like, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, all the men disappeared, or all the men went away, or all the men got locked out. And now, here we have this gender utopia where things are much better. It's just women and trans and non-binary people, and we have gotten rid of all the men, or we, like, visit them every now and then just for breeding purposes, and that's, like, squicky and we don't really like it, but we do it because we have to,
we try not to talk about it.
We have to deal with it. And then third wave feminism comes around where reproductive rights are the biggest issue. We then begin to talk about the actual losing of the men and how, in truth, the fight for reproductive rights is a fight for equality. This is a really fascinating piece. I'm going to link it in our show notes. She wrote a really well-considered article. The reason that she wrote that article, however, was a defense of herself. So I do want to preface this by saying that we on the Ink Sync support our trans brothers and sisters. You are the gender that you are. And if you were accidentally misgendered when you were born, we feel for you and you have a safe space with us. And we are sorry that that happened to you. We want to make sure that you know that your experience is 100% valid. So Sandra Newman wrote a book, another gender utopia book about a plague that wipes out all people with Y chromosomes, and said that trans people would also have been, or trans femme people would also have been wiped out because gender doesn't matter, chromosomes matter. So a bunch of people on Twitter got really angry with her because, boy, is that an unnuanced way to look at it. And so as I'm reading that, I sent you this like 3-paragraph description of how I felt about it. Personally, I think that there's a lot of speculative fiction out there that does grapple with gender issues, and I'm happy that that exists. And I think
we need a space for it, for sure.
And I think that a cohort of cis women, and Sandra Newman is a cisgendered woman, is grappling with it in this way, and kind of tacitly saying that trans people would just be collateral damage in a gender utopia. And as I said, this was just mostly Twitter drama before now, so I haven't really been talking about it on the podcast, but I thought we could use it as a point to jump off and talk about more of the gender exclusionary speculative fiction.
Yeah.
What did you think?
So I was a little baffled by the concept, because why you've got this inexplicable phenomenon that just strikes humanity as a species. It's already inexplicable. Like, you don't have to explicate. Right. There's not only is there no need, there is no way for you to define in a manner that is actually logical to somebody that is trying to scientifically trace back the reality of this thing.
Yeah. Your plague is already magic.
Yeah.
It doesn't need
bullshit.
To be discriminating.
Like, you're already bullshitting.
By people's gender.
So if a trans man was misgendered at birth and is now a trans man, they're affected by this plague in the exact same way as any person that was defined as a male at birth. And similarly, like, so I didn't, until genuinely just now when you were talking, that's when I got how this person's actual book, when they say trans women, they meant, I didn't get that. I thought they were talking, I was like, so why is everybody mad if a woman is trans because they were misgendered at birth and they're now acknowledging themselves as a woman and they're affected by this plague in this novel? Apparently I was wrong. I misread that because it seems so sensible to me, apparently.
Yeah.
It's fiction, you fam. Like, why would you not?
I think that there is
My thoughts are clear.
Big thirst for speculative fiction that grapples with gender that is not written by these cis women who are just like, fuck trans people, basically. I wouldn't call it
intentional, but like, it's
practical.
Maybe not be intentional. It doesn't matter if it's intentional in some cases.
I think it's unintentional transphobic. Like, it's an internalized structural transphobia.
But it's a matter of the genetics. No, you decided that was what it would be. You, as the author, put that into words. You chose that.
That's how I felt too. So in that vein, I went and I looked up a big long list of speculative fiction written by trans writers. For the record, not all of these main characters are trans, but I think that our trans brothers and sisters and non-binaries deserve our support in this time as authors. So please support them. I'm going to put this link in the show notes. I am really actually fascinated and excited to see where this next crop of trans authors takes this speculative gender fiction.
I hope so much that they continue to grow the genre because I think it needs it.
I think it's true that like it's gone with these waves of feminism, and now we're into this new wave. I'm really excited because this is something that we've been seeing for so long from the cisgendered woman's perspective. We can see it now from someone else's perspective. And that, I think, is the power of fiction, especially speculative fiction. It can let you see these scenarios and kind of work through them for yourself without you having to experience a gender apocalypse.
I think that fiction is so important because it connects you as a person emotionally to something that may not necessarily have a personal practical impact on you. That is the lens through which we often see new things, and it's not necessarily the only lens. There are so many other options, and you educate yourself every day in a variety of manners. If you seek out and discuss with trans people and people of minorities and color that aren't
who aren't like you,
yeah, you find ways to communicate and reach out every day. But fiction is such a wide-reaching tool that we have used from the beginning of time, basically. Again, I specifically reached out to our country's roots, but genuinely the beginning of time. Like, I could make this argument if I wanted to create an academic paper on this topic to help educate and to understand and to start growing as a person. Like, fiction is growth. It is a way to explore the human psyche and find better ways to be. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Agreed. So I'm going to put that list of speculative fiction by trans writers in the show notes, and you should be able to take a look at them. And if you have any,
they look great.
If you have any speculative fiction from trans writers that is not in this list, or that you want to shout out, or that you want us to read to recommend, please let us know. We will put it up on our bookshop page, and you can take a look at it there. Moving on, the swan song, unfortunately, of BuzzFeed Investigates. We have been talking about the demise of BuzzFeed News on this show before, for those of you who are joining us maybe for the first time. Recently, BuzzFeed went public, and they are now suddenly beholden to many, many, many more people about how they spend their money. And people are suddenly realizing that news...
It's not marketable, fam. Like, it's critical, but it is operating at a deficit.
It is not cheap. It is not easy.
To do it well. Considering the things that you criticize, what would it cost to fix those things?
Yeah.
And how do you pay for it? Because that's the problem.
That is a good way to look at it. Yeah. So the BuzzFeed News team, including the BuzzFeed Investigations team, has been offered buyouts pretty much roundly, and many of them are taking it. But a lot of people...
They're so good. Just to be clear, they deserve it. They 100% deserve every good thing that is coming to them, and I really hope that the staff en masse, because 2/3 of them have lost their jobs, and I hope every single person that is moving on is able to move on to a place that supports their dreams and aspirations.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with businessy-ish terms, we say the word buyout and it sounds kind of negative, but buyout means that these people who are leaving, who are essentially being forced out, they're being forced out but with very large checks to send them on their way. They're not essentially being thrown out on the street. They are getting... Usually a buyout is several months worth of your salary.
So you have time to find a job.
Yeah. So we say buyouts, and when we say that's deserved, we don't mean that it's deserved that they're leaving their jobs. We mean it's deserved that they are getting that money commensurate with their value. And they are, I mean, obviously their value is significantly higher. BuzzFeed Investigations has made a name for itself well-deservedly.
Oh, yes.
And BuzzFeed News also made a name for itself well-deservedly.
The company would not be where it is today without the respect that they got for their news organization. I'm coming out. I'm putting that out there. I don't think this is a controversial opinion, but if it is, I'll stand by it and make my arguments.
I think the fact that almost all of them are moving to places like CNN, places like...
where investigative journalism matters.
Yeah, right.
And I really hope that they're able to bring the things that they've learned. And speaking of the swan song, and speaking of this last...
yeah, we are going to get into their investigation because it's fascinating.
It's amazing. But in general, speaking to their body of work, this newsroom's body of work, I really hope that the places that they're going are able to support them continuing to deliver this quality of content, because that is going to be critical nationwide in moving forward and relearning trust in certain national media organizations.
Absolutely.
Across the board.
This article is from Vanity Fair. They're talking about KKR, which is a residential management company for elderly people, and they blew the whistle, blew the lid off of some elder abuse.
Just absolutely. And BuzzFeed, as always, for their news organization, fucking brought receipts. And that's what I'm talking about when I mentioned the fact that I want them to help restore credibility. It's the fact that not only did they find the claim to make, they can support the claim.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm hoping continues to happen in these places where these people are going, because they brought receipts, fam.
Right. And specifically, of course, like, we do want to say we obviously want to support the families of the KKR residents who have been neglected and essentially been tortured by these elder care workers who just didn't care about them. And I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but after going through the pandemic, I am never ever going to put my parents into an elder care home.
Oh, I just want to be clear, so I got very lucky with my company in that they expanded our benefits during the pandemic. And one of the things that they expanded was child and elderly care. And the fact that my company was considering this, and the fact that they could have invested in something like KKR, which could have then immediately abused... to be fair, so we as a family, we had to take advantage of this. We had to, because my grandmother had 2 major surgeries during the height of the pandemic, and she had to go into care. It was the middle of summer, like genuinely humid and miserable and hot, and we couldn't go inside to see her. We had to go sit outside her window. She was a goldfish.
And she had surgery.
It wasn't surgeries.
It wasn't like she was just chilling somewhere. Like, she was recovering from an invasive surgery.
We all had a rough time with it. So we were able to go to her FaceTime or whatever and talk to her in person and make sure that she was happy, at least as best as she could be, and comfortable and had what she needed. Like, the idea of someone vulnerable, and it wasn't always the case. We had to talk to her facility. And there weren't always great caregivers, but they did their best and responded to our questions and our concerns. The idea that there are caregivers that might not do that is heartbreaking.
And horrifying. And that's why investigations news teams are so important. I mean, we joke sometimes about Fox 45 investigates this froyo place is not giving you a full cup of froyo. We joke about that, but honestly, if that investigation team didn't exist, maybe we wouldn't know about it. I'm just thinking of, like, from my childhood, the Fox investigation team going after these, like, shady car dealerships who were selling cars to their friends, not at, like, the correct price, and essentially jacking up the price. Like, it was a whole thing, and it was, like, a big thing, and the Fox 45 team was like, yo, I don't like this. We should do something about it. And we can make fun of any news outlet as much as we want. God knows there's been much making fun of BuzzFeed and Fox.
And all of the above. They are as worthy, and both investigative arms and branches are worthy of respect commensurate to the effort that they put into their investigations. And I think that is the case everywhere, whether you have CNN, BuzzFeed, BBC, Fox. I have no issues with the news branch, and the local news branch specifically for Fox, even though I may not necessarily agree with the broader approach of the network for their news choices. Mm-hmm. Especially their opinions. Yes, correct.
The opinion shows that they choose to promote.
Yes, but their investigative pieces, I will 100% watch and appreciate and review for the quality of their journalism and the investigative work that they put in. And there are absolutely phenomenal investigative journalists employed at news organizations that I don't otherwise necessarily watch, because that shit matters.
I 100% agree. So this piece from Vanity Fair was kind of meta. They kind of cursorily talked about the story, the investigation that Buzzfeed did itself, kind of couching it in the larger story of the fact that Buzzfeed investigations is about to reduce by, what was it, 2/3?
2/3.
And I really kind of want to talk about how this is emblematic of what's happening in the broader news journalism space. We talked about how venture capital, which is the main supporter of smaller, more innovative news organizations, is shying away from news these days. So I feel like this whole situation really is emblematic of kind of a broader thing in journalism that I'm not sure everyone really understands. We talked about this in our fact-checking episode, which might have ended up on the cutting room floor. I say might have as if I'm not in control of it. But basically, news, unfortunately, it is a business. You know, Kaylee really did a bunch of research on the history of fact-checking and the history of news as a business. But basically, you know, news is a business for better or for worse. And what we're seeing right now with BuzzFeed and others, but unfortunately, you know, I say unfortunately just because sometimes it's just really depressing that news is just a business. There is more news as a business stuff, and we did promise you information on Ukraine. The BBC launched a podcast on Ukraine when the invasion started, and it was a daily podcast. They are cutting it back to weekly. It's because news, again, is a business, and people are not tuning in anymore. Well,
I mean, and keep in mind, and I think that this is something to consider, that a war itself has a number of phases, and the Russia-Ukraine war, you've got people that are genuinely trying to do their best, that are trying to figure out ways to communicate the relevant information in such a way that people are still paying attention. And so that's where we're at currently with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Annie, what did I miss anything there? I'm sorry.
No, you were absolutely correct. This news comes to us from Press Gazette, which is kind of a meta news analysis site talking about news, which is the section that we're at right now. And yeah, that was one of the things that I read these stories, the BuzzFeed Swan Song plus the Ukraine cutback story really close together, and it really brought home to me how much news is a business. And I think some people don't realize that or don't want to think about it.
Well, it's the practicalities of it. We all live in a society, don't we? we sure do. And it's the idea of that, which is 100% accurate. And everything that you do and everything that you see in the world is paid for by somebody, because that's where we are. And that's capitalism, baby. You're welcome. Sorry, that was so loud. But then you've got to think about the stuff that people don't want to necessarily think about and that they don't want to hear about, but that is accurate and truthful. It's the unfortunate truth. And that's where we're at. And sometimes it just doesn't pay. That's where we're at.
Yeah. For those of you who, again, don't maybe know about how the news gets funded, Toyota kind of just has to sign off on, I'm saying Toyota, but as an example, like someone has to sign off on advertising in that space. Otherwise, those reporters aren't going to get paid.
Somebody has to pay them to eat. They have to eat. And it's, again, we're a capitalist society. That's where we're at. That's what we've chosen to be. And the people that sign the checks, sign the checks.
And now for our favorite news section, celebrating women and minorities in publishing. Kaylee, Ajoda Ando has been honored as a Golden Voice by AudioFile magazine. Had you heard her voice before?
Yes, so definitely had heard her voice before. I will be super honest, I didn't know her name to the voice because I'm not good at mapping those things.
Had you watched Bridgerton?
No, girl.
Oh, my bad. Okay, so for those of you who have watched Bridgerton.
So I knew her for her audiobooks, just to be clear. Just to be clear. What we're talking about her for. I knew her for that, but only because like I knew her voice. I didn't know her name. I am a trash person. I get it.
gorgeous. So she plays Lady Danbury in Bridgerton. She is the older black woman who supports the Duke in season 1 and Kate Sharma in season 2. I mean, her voice is
gorgeous.
So she is being honored as a Golden Voice, recognizing her incredible voice, literally and figuratively.
150. That's amazing. 150 audiobooks.
This comes from Audiophile magazine. I will link it into the show notes. Another woman was recognized in there. Juliet Stevenson, also an audiobook narrator. I went through her bibliography and I had not listened to any of these books, but I listened to a snippet of her voice. And again, I have come to appreciate people's voices a lot more since starting this podcast. To hate my own voice even more. But
yeah, it's rough every now and then. You realize you sound like a chipmunk, and that's just, what can you do?
I hate it so much.
What can you do?
People, don't start a podcast.
Just don't
hate everything.
Just change your mind.
And in the interest of, supporting everyone who was honored at the same time. So this Golden Voice Award was honored with 3 people: Adjoa Ando and Juliet Stevenson and Robert Degas, who is also an audiobook narrator.
I will say that I did connect Degas just because I was a huge, huge Philip Pullman fan. And The Golden Compass was one of my favorite books. So
he did the Golden Compass series.
It was he was the Lyra's Damon. Yeah.
Moving on to our favorite section. Kaylee, what are you reading?
Girl, I didn't read anything. I'm still exactly where I was in the Percy Jackson series. I'm sorry. I'm a disappointment to you. Yeah. To myself.
Yes, accurate.
To the world. To our one listener in Russia. What are you reading? Please save me.
She's asking you, our one listener
in Russia. One listener in Russia. I am specific. Also, please, anyone ever wants to talk about what they're reading, send it in. Like, we want to know. Honestly, if you've got our book recommendation, yeah.
For sure.
But also, Annie, what are you reading?
The latest Associated Press style book came out, which sounds quite nerdy, and in fact is. So for those of you who don't know, most news organizations use AP style for where commas should go and how you should refer to certain objects or places or people, just because it's one of the biggest news organizations in the world. So the AP style book is widely read. We've talked about this before, I've worked in news for my entire career, so every time a new AP style book comes out, I do purchase it. I also have an online subscription. There's no reason for me to buy the physical copy. I'm just
support. You're supporting
I'm
them.
A problem.
No.
But this is also the issue where they have codified that, and I'm going to read to you from the book, pronouns. As much as possible, AP now uses they, them, their as a way of accurately describing and representing a person who uses those pronouns for themselves.
That's not new, by the way. That is, if you didn't know the gender of something, from the 1300s, you used they, even for singular. So anybody that says that this is newfangled cultural proprietary bullshit is incorrect at best, and that is all I will say on the topic.
Yeah, what I just read was a directive for AP reporters, and because so many other people use the AP style book, it is a directive for essentially reporters at large. I regularly attend the Editors Society conference. This year it was in San Antonio, and every year at the Editors Society conference, the AP style book team comes in and talks about any updates to the style guide. And every year, copy editors and editors in general across the spectrum sit in that audience and go, "Oh my God, you're changing the comma rules!" It's very funny, I have to say.
As an editor, she has to say.
So a couple years ago, they got rid of the idea that you would be essentially set on fire if you ever used a serial comma. And when that happened, the uproar was literally audible across the convention center. I literally heard it 3 convention rooms down. And I was like, I wonder what's going on. People were so mad. They were yelling.
I'm not surprised that grammar nerds were yelling, Annie, I'll be honest.
It was very fun.
No surprise.
Anyway, I do want to read you the intro to this What's New section in the AP Style book. It says, this edition of the AP Style book features a new chapter on inclusive storytelling, emphasizing that such efforts are essential to accuracy and fairness and giving guidance on how to achieve those goals. We note that inclusive storytelling seeks to truly represent all people around the globe, giving voice and visibility to those who have been missing or misrepresented in traditional narratives of both history and daily journalism. Among the chapter's focuses, recognizing and overcoming unconscious biases, being sensitive about specific words and phrases, reaching beyond your usual sources and story ideas, including the necessary context and background, avoiding tokenism, and making content accessible. And for a news organization to have that mandate set out in their style book, which means a directive for both their reporters and their editors, which are their bread and butter, that's really wonderful to see. And we say this all the time, but it's very heartening to know that they are willing to go the extra mile to explicitly say there are people out there who have been maligned by us, and we want to make sure that in the future that does not happen. So that's what I've been reading.
I think that's fantastic. I do think that there are so many options to not make that last step and actually just officially be like, yo, here's how we're going to fix the thing that we did wrong before. And I appreciate that.
As I said, we are changing our format just a little bit, so this is where we're going to end this episode. And next week, you are going to hear us starting a brand new main topic series. Dun, dun, dun. I'm really excited to share it with you guys. Tune in next week, and we will see you next time.
Dun, dun.
If you guys ever need a podcasting co-host, I'm in the market.